Hey everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here, yeehaw, and today I'm going to be talking about the Pokemon that need buffs, the Pokemon that need nerfs, and a lot of the Pokemon that I think are pretty balanced inside the game right now. We have possibly a balance patch incoming very soon with the release of Duraludon, so let's take a look at some of the Pokemon we have right now and where they are inside the game. Our categories: so much buff, our S tier, a little buffy, our A tier, the B tier. Still got the B tier, and the C tier could use a nerf. So this isn't really a tier list, but I'm using it in this format just because it's easy to show where I think all these Pokemon land. Let's just start with the fact that I think a lot of the game is pretty balanced right now. I don't think there are huge swings all over the place, but there are Pokemon that could use a little tune-up here and there. Let's start with one of my favorites, Cramorant. I think Cramorant is a Pokemon that's been left behind for a long time here, and it could definitely use a buff. While I'm talking about this, if I need to, I can pull up my game right here and kind of go into what I think should happen with these Pokemon. Basically with Cram, a while back, its Dive and Air Slash, I believe, both got a buff, but its Surf got nerfed at some point, and its Unite move got nerfed at some point. And this Unite move used to actually be pretty dangerous, Gatling Gulp Missile, and now it's pretty nothing. I think Cram has really been left behind in the game, and it could definitely use a buff. So I would like to see a lot of buffs for Cram, and a big reason for that also is you're comparing Cram to other attackers who are performing much better. Let's talk about one. This is borderline. It's Pikachu. So Pikachu could use a little nerf. And let me talk about nerfs here for a second. I don't think a ton needs to be done with a lot of these Pokemon. In fact, if you want to leave Pikachu the way it is and just buff some of the other attackers, okay, I could see something like that. But right now, Pikachu is far and away the best ranged mage type artillery attacker in the game, and other Pokemon like Cramorant who do a similar job don't even come close. The Unite's not even close to as good. The moves don't even work as well. It's not even close. So I'd like to see a little nerf for Pikachu here if they have to nerf anyone. However, I would rather see a buff to Cram. I like Cram just getting a little buff. Just bring it online to the level Pikachu is. That would be pretty cool, in my opinion. Now that we are talking about some of the attackers in the game, let's keep talking about some of the attackers. Let's talk about Alolan Ninetales. Little buff for Alolan Ninetales. Alolan Ninetales is good, but one of Alolan Ninetales' movesets is bad. So Alolan Ninetales is in kind of this weird spot as well. It's not as good as Pikachu, and it does a similar job. However, one of its movesets still does a lot of damage here. So if we look at Ninetales, it's Avalanche Blizzard is a pretty good combo. It's a good combo. It deals a lot of damage. Its issue is its Unite move, nowhere close to as good as Pikachu's, doesn't charge the way Pikachu's does, and we're talking about a Pokemon who does a similar job. Now, however, if they want to keep Blizzard and Avalanche the way it is, maybe tune up its Unite a little bit, but buff its Aurora Veil Dazzling Gleam, I would love to see some changes here. One change that I love is the idea that maybe Aurora Veil follows you around, so you don't just set it on the ground and then fight within that area. Maybe you move with it. I mean, that could be one of those quality of life changes that you see in a Pokemon like Gengar or something like that, where you go, oh, they're actually changing the way some of this Pokemon's kit works. I would love to see something like that for Alolan Ninetales. It's definitely not a terrible Pokemon, but it could use a little buff, especially when you compare it to someone very similar like Pikachu. And that's a lot of what you find in this game is, well, it's not that Alolan Ninetales is the worst, but Pikachu's so much better, so why would you play Alolan Ninetales when you could play Pikachu? Moving on to another ranged attacker, Gardevoir. I don't want to see any changes for Guard. I think Guard's in a perfect spot in the game right now. Please don't mess with it. It's great, but not too great. It's awesome. Gardevoir's I love Gardevoir. Don't change Gardevoir, please. It's so good, but it's not to the point where you can't play because it's in the game. So I think it's in a really, really nice spot. Any other attackers like this? There's always one I'm missing because the roster's starting to get big and my brain just starts to forget things. Let's talk about Sylveon. Sylveon's in this weird middle ground. I think Sylveon could use a little buff. When Sylveon first came out, it was completely overtuned, let's face it. But now Sylveon actually needs a little help. And part of the issue is that it's just not mobile enough with its Hyper Voice moveset to kind of deal with how mobile some of the enemies in the game are getting, or some of the other Pokemon, I should say. And then its Mystical Fire just doesn't do enough damage later in the game. This Pokemon just really falls off super hard, whereas other Pokemon like Pikachu and stuff don't fall off. It's also got this weird middle ground because it's not long range. It's kind of short range. It's just in this weird spot. I know that this is possibly too simplistic, but a slight damage buff, don't bring it back to what it was, but a slight damage buff on a lot of what Ninetales does. Excuse me. Did I call it Ninetales? A lot of what Sylveon does could be very beneficial for this Pokemon. I like how I'm like, you got a buff Ninetales and Sylveon. It's like I'm bought and paid for by big Ninetales and big Sylveon, but I really do think those Pokemon could use a little love here. It's not a ton. We don't need to take Ninetales back to where it was when it was released, but it needs a little something because now I think it's just getting outclassed by a lot of other Pokemon. More attackers here that are like this. I think we're kind of running into our 80 carry attackers right now. So Cinderace could use a little nerf. However, just like Pikachu, I actually like where Cinder is in the game right now. It's just, it means that we could probably get a slight, very slight buff to two other Pokemon, and that is Greninja and Decidueye. Now, Decidueye, here's the thing. Decidueye is worse than the other two, and by far. I mean, there's no question about it. However, it is performing the way they want that character to perform. So we don't want Decidueye to become Cinderace or to become Greninja. You could maybe do a little something to it. Greninja, the same thing, a little something. However, if this patch came out and all three of these Pokemon just hung out in this balance section, I don't think that would be a bad idea at all. Cinder's the strongest. Greninja could use a little help. And Decidueye, they keep buffing, so I don't want them to just buff Decidueye every single patch, but as always, it being kind of the worst of the three Pokemon that do a similar job, it could use just a little something. Do I know what that is? Not exactly. I would say it's probably mobility, or maybe, you know, kind of like we were talking about with Cramorant, maybe they just fix its Unite move a little. Maybe if we just do something to this Unite move, knock knock, maybe that makes it a little bit better. I don't know what you do to it. Maybe you kind of rework the way this Unite move works. Maybe it's a rain of arrows in an area. Maybe we just change it so it's no longer this long range sort of, you know, huge turret attack that you're shooting across the map. Maybe it's just a rain of damage in an area for a small period of time and you get, you know, some increased movement speed. And there you go. Maybe that fixes it. I don't know exactly what you do. With Greninja, I think it's just slight. We're just talking numbers here with Greninja because Greninja is extremely good. I don't think you need to do a ton to Greninja. It could kind of stay the way it is. The only problem is Cinderace is just so much better than the other two right now, it feels like. What attacker am I missing? Venusaur could always use a little nerf. I don't know if they will. I love Venusaur. It's crazy. It's crazy good. Petal Dance Giga Drain's insane. Solar Beam also, you see it used competitively as well. It's insane. This Pokemon could be tuned down a little bit. However, you run into this area where you tune it down a little, like they've done with Lucario a few times, and it's still kind of viable, but you tune it down too much, and then all of a sudden you never see the Pokemon again. So they tuned down Cramorant a little bit, and it was completely unviable. So they have to be very careful with some of these changes. However, these Pokemon are just kind of nuts right now, Venusaur being one of the most nuts Pokemon in the game. So I think you could do something to it. Something to its Petal Dance Giga Drain is probably the most reasonable thing to change. I don't think it needs much in its Solar Beam department. Let's see. The Solar Beam department. How's everything at work, sweetie? It's good. You know, the guys in the Solar Beam department, they're difficult. Okay. Moving on to, let's go to our speedsters. I think Absol is very well balanced right now. If you want Absol to compete with Cinderace, Greninja and stuff like that for a role in the central area, that's a much bigger conversation. That there's much more that has to be done to the game. But right now, I think Absol is in a really good spot here. Gengar always could use a slight buff, but again, it's a lot like Decidueye, where you want it to have a slight buff. However, you kind of get what it's doing in the game right now. So it's kind of doing what they want Gengar to do. What do you do with that, right? Could use a little bit of a buff. I would like to see some sort of extra mobility for Gengar. Somehow a disengage, because Gengar can get into a fight really well, but Gengar then can't do it. It's like, where does it go? If it doesn't KO everyone, it's gone. So I don't know what you do with that. Maybe they just want to increase its damage so it has a higher chance of KOing everyone, or maybe they want to give it some way to escape an encounter with an enemy. That might be the way to go. Talonflame, I think it's pretty balanced. It might be slightly overtuned, but they recently nerfed its fly, and they upped its Brave Bird to sort of compete with that, but it's not like it completely outclasses attackers in the central area. So I think Talonflame's in a pretty good spot right now. They could nerf it slightly, but what I'd rather see is a buff for Zeraora. So Zeraora's great. But, and I don't know if they actually show this in game or they just kind of talk about it. Zeraora is awesome. However, Zeraora's moves level at the worst rate. It does. Okay, it doesn't actually say what level it upgrades, does it? No, it just says it upgrades. So Zeraora gets its first move at level 6. That's way late for someone coming out of that central area. Almost everyone gets something at 5 if they're coming out of the central area. I think maybe everyone gets a new move at 5. So Zeraora comes out of that central area, the jungle, to gank the top or bottom path, and it has no additional bonus coming from that jungle. It needs something. You could lower this move to 5. I think that would be reasonable. If you want to keep it at 6, okay. But now we also have its next move, not its Unite move, its next move at 8. Maybe if you still want to keep that first move at 6, for whatever reason you think that first upgrade's too powerful, you knock this move back down to 7 or something like that. And then that way we could at least have its Unite move come at level 9 instead of level 10 like it already has. And then all of its leveling, you upgrade your next move at 12, and then finally Discharge or Wild Charge gets upgraded at level 14. It's just way too far out there. I almost feel like it's an oversight at this point because it's the only Pokemon like this, and it's not good enough to need this weird leveling curve that no longer exists in the game. Back when Garchomp and Gardevoir and I think Mamoswine, even when all these Pokemon had a similar leveling system, it kind of made sense, but now Zeraora is just completely left out in the dark. It's not a bad Pokemon, but it needs some help if you want it to be able to compete for some of these spots. That's my opinion on Zera right there. What Speedster am I missing? That's all 4 of them, right? Okay, cool. We need more Speedsters, by the way. Oh, and also, while you're watching this, if a Pokemon comes up and you have an idea for a buff or nerf for it, I would love to hear it. Please leave it in the comments. That would be very cool, because I love the discussion around things like this. People come up with some great ideas of how to fix some of these things. Let's do our defenders. I think Blastoise is pretty solid right now. There isn't too much you need to do to it. It was nerfed a few times. It's still really good. Maybe you could make its rapid spin a little bit better, but I think Blastoise is in a really good spot right now. I don't think you need to do much to it at all. Crustle is okay, could use a little buff. So they took away Crustle's critical hit ability, and because of that, I think you could just give it a little something. I don't know what it is. I like that they upped its boosted basic attack a little while back, but it still could use a little something. It's still doing Crustle things, but it feels like it's really outclassed by Greedent in almost every way. Not every single scenario, but almost every way Greedent is better than Crustle. So I would like to see just a little love for Crustle, and I recognize how excited score comp teams would be if that happened, but Crustle just needs a little something here, and it could just be some slight scaling on some of its numbers, maybe make it a little stronger, maybe make it even tankier? I don't know. But the defenders as a whole are kind of in this weird spot right now where supporters are being played more often than defenders because they're of similar HP and tankiness, and some of their abilities just seem more useful. Maybe you need to make all the defenders a little tankier or all the supporters a little less tanky. That's a big picture change, but a little something can be done to Crustle. Greedent's been nerfed a bunch. I don't think you really need to nerf Greedent. I think it's doing what it needs to do right now. You just need to have other defenders that feel like more viable picks. But as far as this sort of harasser Pokemon that's all over the map, I think Greedent is performing as it should. You nerf Greedent too much, and this role just disappears from the game. It won't exist. You won't have a Pokemon doing what Greedent does. Now, maybe some people would like that, but I think Greedent is kind of performing as expected right now. It's not amazing in team fights, but it is pretty good one-on-one. It's extremely good at stealing wild Pokemon and scoring, and again, just putting pressure everywhere. I don't think you want to nerf it too much, because then you lose that entire role inside the game. That entire, like, harasser role. Mamo, slight buff, and it's to its Unite move. Mamo's Unite move is the worst. I hate Mamo's Unite move. It's so bad. I don't know what they're doing with it. It could use a slight buff. A little bitty buff. All the defenders kind of could use a little bitty buff, just because the defender role needs a little love. But in general, Mamo needs a Unite move buff. It's way too weak. You compare it to Blastoise's Unite, it's just crazy. Slowbro, it's finally getting some play. I don't want people to mess with it at all. It's strong, really strong, but I'm happy where it is. You don't see enough defenders anymore, so I think Slowbro is in a really good spot. Snorlax, this is just the defenders overall, you know? They're good. Here's the thing. I could add another category here that's just the defender category, and all it would be is, let's do something to make defenders a little more viable, because supporters are kind of taking over their entire role right now. But in general, I think Snorlax is really great. It's a great Pokemon. Almost grabbed Wigglytuff here. I mean, Trevenant, lots of buffs. Lots of buffs for Trev. Love Trev. Love playing Trev. It needs buffs. It needs love. It's just not as good as the other defenders at all. It needs help across the board, and it's weird because you just tune it up a little bit everywhere, and all of a sudden this Pokemon is 8 million% better. It's weird how that works, but I think we could do a lot with Trev. It's not specific things. I don't need to go, well, with Wood Hammer or with Pain Split. If you change everything a little bit. If there was a dial, I just want you to turn up the dial on Trevenant a little bit, and I think all of a sudden that Pokemon, super good, a lot better, super viable. Let's see. Those are all our defenders, right? Am I missing anybody? I don't think so. I keep doing this. All right. Supporters. Blissey. Blissey is the only supporter that could use a slight buff, but if it didn't get anything, that wouldn't be a big deal. Actually, that's not true. I'll get to this in 1 second. That's not entirely true. It could maybe use a little buff because its healing is not as good as Eldegoss's healing. And if you want a Pokemon that actually has a shot at healing, kind of like Eldegoss, you want a supporter that supports through healing, I think you could do something to Blissey's Soft Boiled. Maybe it charges way faster. You get way more healing out of Blissey. Something like that could be really nice. Otherwise, I think Blissey's pretty solid. But if you want its healing to compete with Eldy, you kind of got to give it a little buff. Eldegoss could probably always use a nerf. It's one of the best Pokemon in the game. But if you don't nerf it, I understand, because it's weird to nerf a Pokemon that has kind of a very specific role. You know, it's kind of the same thing I was saying with Greedent. Why would you nerf a Pokemon that has a very, very specific role? But as always, it could use a slight nerf if we want to see other Pokemon in its place. However, I am seeing people kind of switch out, possibly Eldegoss with Hoopa. So I could be wrong about this. It wouldn't be crazy to me to see no changes to Eldy at all. But it could always use a slight nerf, or Blissey could use a slight buff. Just some more healing options, basically. But I would be fine with keeping this in the B tier. In fact, I think I kind of will, because it recently got some nerfs, so I don't think you need to do too much more to it. Mr. Mime could actually use a buff. If we're just talking about Psychic Mr. Mime, it could use a massive buff. Psychic Mr. Mime is awful. It's one of the worst moves in the game, which is because its other move is one of the great. Like, Confusion is amazing. Confusion on Mr. Mime is so good, and Psychic on Mr. Mime is so bad. It makes no sense. I feel like they forgot this move exists. I'm serious. No one plays it, obviously. So please, buff Psychic Mime. It needs a buff. Absolutely. Wiggly could always use a nerf. I don't know what they could do to it. I kind of love Wiggly. It could always use a nerf. It's so good. It's always so good. Hoopa, I'm just going to put here for now. There hasn't been enough time with Hoopa to know exactly what they're going to do with it. I thought Hyperspace Hole would be the build that everyone was running, but it actually looks like people are running Trick. I wonder if they're... I wonder if they might change Hyperspace Hole to make it slightly better. I know that sounds insane, but we just haven't spent enough time with Hoopa. I want to see more Hoopa, especially competitively, especially on teams that are running score comps, before I know what we should do with this Pokemon. Right now, I think don't touch it. It's fine. And on to the all-rounders. I consider Crashy an all-rounder, so I could say maybe nerf Crashy, but for now, I'm just going to leave him out of this because he just needs more time. Okay. Char, Gar, Luck, Much, Za, Drag, and Aegislash. Charizard, great. Very good. You don't need to do anything to Char. It's really solid right now. Don't mess with it. It's good. It's really, really good. Garchomp, they have buffed Garchomp so many times, and it's finally in a spot where I think it's pretty decent. I kind of don't want them to touch it because they keep messing. They've messed with Garchomp since day one. They've been trying to make this Pokemon good, and I think it's the closest. It's the closest, excuse me, that it's ever been. So for now, I'm just gonna say keep it where it is. Don't mess with Garchomp. You've messed with it so much. Let's let the game develop a little bit and see if people can make it viable. If not, you know, by the next few Pokemon that release, we could buff Chomp again. Lucario could always use a bit of a nerf. Always. It's been probably one of the best Pokemon, or not the best Pokemon, in multiple patches throughout the game. It could always use a little bit of a nerf. Machamp, finally super strong. Don't mess with him. He's in a good spot right now. He's a good guy. Don't mess with Machamp. He's good. Things are going well for Machamp. Zarina? I think you got to buff Zarina. I might even say so much buff. So here's my thought with Zarina. We used to see Zarina so much, and now you never see it ever again. That's unfortunate. You don't want to nerf a Pokemon so much that no one plays it anymore. So get back in there. Make Zarina good. Look, it's competing with Lucario and Machamp. For the most part, in that top lane spot. Make it good. Make Serena good again. Come on. Dragonite, fine. Dragonite's fine. They nerfed it a lot, but it's still good. Dragonite's fine. I don't mind Dragonite at all. And Aegislash. Aegislash, I think, needs a buff. So we can head back into the game really quick here, just so I can show you Aegislash. Aegislash is a really solid Pokemon. I think it's like middle of the road, kind of a B tier Pokemon. The move I really want to see buffed on Aegislash is this. I really want to see Shadow Claw buffed. So Aegislash, or maybe it's not Shadow Claw, but maybe it's just Aegislash's critical hits in general. So Aegislash has very low critical hit compared to other Pokemon. However, when this move gets upgraded, it increases your critical hit rate for basic attacks, boosted attacks, and all moves except Unite moves for a short time when the last attack and the Shadow Claw hits. Sounds pretty cool, but all this does is bring Aegislash up to what everyone else's normal crit rate is at that point. So it basically, once Shadow Claw hits, it does the same critical hits as a Cinderace. And I don't think that's right. I think it should definitely do more than that. Give it the highest or if you're going to increase its critical hit, make that really matter. When it finally hits that, upgrade and it can start doing these big critical hits, maybe that would be really cool. I would like to see some buffs there. So I'm not going to mess with anybody and swap some things around here. This isn't a standard tier list. These are just Pokemon I want to see buffs, maybe slight buffs, Pokemon I think that are balanced, and Pokemon that could need a nerf. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. More cool stuff coming soon. And tomorrow, I'm going to be streaming here on YouTube a ton of the games from the March qualifiers. I'm going to try to get games from Team Shiny, Foreign Famous, the Bandicoots, and hopefully a bunch more. So I hope you enjoy that right here, 12 p.m. PST. I'll see you then. Goodbye.